Welcome to this deep dive. This week, we're tracking, really, a collision of two monumental crises across the Asia-Pacific. You've got escalating geopolitical tension, and right alongside it, the raw power of major tropical storm systems.
This is quite the convergence.
Indeed. Our objective here is simple: to cut through the noise. We want to distill the complex information from multiple sources into clear, actionable facts for you. We'll identify the key players, their viewpoints, and what might happen next.
All delivered factually, without the hype.
Exactly. Now, before we dive in, a moment to acknowledge our partner. This analysis is brought to you by ProWave AI, helping you optimize data workflows.
And it's worth noting, the intelligence underpinning this report, drawn from well over 250 global feeds, is generated by Stylo News, the AI-powered news application.
Okay, let's unpack this situation. What really defines this past week is that overlap, isn't it? The military moves and the major weather systems are hitting the very same geographical flashpoints all at once.
That's the core dynamic right now. Our sources confirm intense activity, both strategic and, well, atmospheric, right across the South China Sea, the Taiwan Strait, and the Philippines EC area. Naval operations aren't happening in isolation. They're occurring while commanders are constantly checking storm forecasts.
So let's start with perhaps the most significant strategic move we saw. A very deliberate, very public show of force by the U.S. Navy. On September 23rd, the U.S. announced the docking of the USS Ohio at Subic Bay, Philippines.
And this isn't just any vessel. We need to be clear. This is an Ohio-class nuclear submarine.
Right, not a standard attack sub. What makes the Ohio class different in this context?
Well, these specific ones, the SSGNs, are converted ballistic missile subs. The key detail really is their payload. They're capable of carrying 154 long-range Tomahawk cruise missiles.
154 Tomahawks. That's a staggering amount of land attack capability being positioned right there in the first island chain. Why is deploying an SSGN like the Ohio so different from sending, say, a regular attack submarine?
It signals a different kind of intent. It's the difference between hunting other naval assets and projecting power deep inland. A standard attack sub focuses on other ships, other subs. The USS Ohio, though, sends an undeniable message about strategic commitment to regional security. Its main role is holding targets far inside an adversary's territory at risk. It's a statement about reach, about resolve, that goes well beyond simple freedom of navigation patrols.
So if that's the signal coming from the U.S., we also have to look at what's been happening on the Chinese side, specifically the advancements that might have prompted this kind of display. The Ohio deployment came after a successful test on China's newest aircraft carrier, the Fujian.
Yes, the carrier-based aircraft catapult and arrested landing tests. This is a huge technical leap for them.
How so? What's the difference compared to their other carriers, the Shandong and Liaoning?
Those older carriers use ski jump ramps. That limits the weight, the fuel load, the armament of the aircraft they can launch. The Fujian, however, uses a catapult system, what's often called Kato bar, catapult-assisted takeoff, but arrested recovery.
And the practical implication in a potential conflict, what does that mean?
It dramatically boosts combat effectiveness. Kato bar means aircraft can launch heavier, with full fuel tanks and maximum weapons. So suddenly the Fujian significantly extends China's potential power projection range and the operational tempo, the sortie rate, of its carrier air wing.
And our sources place both the Fujian and the Shandong currently at Yulin Naval Base.
That's correct. It underscores this sort of coordinated push to enhance their capabilities in the region.
Now, the U.S. wasn't the only allied navy active. We also tracked significant movements by the U.K. Royal Navy. HMS Richmond transited the Taiwan Strait, and HMS Prince of Wales, their carrier, was operating in the South China Sea.
And the Chinese response to that really highlights the current tension levels. The People's Liberation Army, the PLA, countered with close surveillance, yes, but also, critically, they performed simulated missile attacks against the British vessels. Sources are calling these constructive kills.
Constructive kills. That phrase itself sounds clinically unsettling. What does it actually signify?
It's primarily a psychological move. It means the PLA is sending very clear, likely digitally modeled signals, indicating they've achieved targeting solutions on the British ships. They're saying, we could have engaged kinetically, but we chose not to.
So it's an assertion of capability, a form of deterrence.
Exactly. Designed to raise the stakes, to inject risk, without actually firing a shot. But, it absolutely underscores how quickly things could escalate, how high the risk of miscalculation is in these crowded, contested waters.
This friction certainly seems to be accelerating regional efforts towards alliance building. We saw the Indian Navy, for instance, successfully complete its first submarine intervention and rescue exercise Pacific Reach 2025 near Singapore.
Yes, demonstrating enhanced interoperability with foreign submarines. That's significant in that sensitive underwater environment.
And this military cooperation seems mirrored on the diplomatic front. The foreign ministers from the U.S., South Korea, and Japan met in New York just recently, September 22nd.
They did. And their joint statement was quite pointed, unified and clear, expressing concern about destabilizing activities around Taiwan and specifically calling out unlawful maritime claims in the South China Sea. It shows a very coordinated diplomatic front.
This coordination feels like it might be building towards something bigger. Sources suggest serious discussions are underway, U.S., Japan, Australia, the Philippines, about potentially establishing a collective defense pact, something akin to NATO, aimed squarely at deterring Chinese expansionism.
That would be a monumental step. A treaty like NATO involves mutual defense clauses, automatic commitments. That's incredibly complex to negotiate, especially among nations with quite diverse strategic interests and political systems. Is this seen as a near-term possibility or more of a long-term goal?
It certainly signals a direction, a shared concern. But perhaps the immediate pressure points on the water are driving this conversation faster. Look at Hwangin Island, Scarborough Shoal. China has really intensified patrols there since September.
They have. And what's interesting is the method. It's not just Coast Guard ships. China has announced the establishment of a national-level nature reserve at the shoal.
Using environmental protection.
Precisely. Using environmental law as a tool to legitimize and strengthen their enforcement against what they see as incursions. It's a kind of hybrid strategy using soft justification for asserting harder control over the area.
And that move, predictably, has drawn a regional response. Naval leaders from the Philippines and Vietnam met in Manila just days ago, September 23rd, specifically to bolster their bilateral defense ties.
Right. And this meeting highlights something sources are calling China's dual standard approach. The idea is that Beijing often takes a somewhat softer line with Vietnam, perhaps due to complex historical ties, while being much more confrontational towards the Philippines.
So Manila feels the need to build partnerships beyond just the U.S.
It seems so. Seeking regional partners, strengthening multilateral ties. Meanwhile, the broader surveillance picture is also hardening. We should mention the permanent deployment of U.S. Air Force MQ-9 Reaper drones at Kunsan Air Base in South Korea.
Which enhances surveillance over.
Primarily North Korea, of course, but it also significantly boosts the ISR intelligence, surveillance, reconnaissance capabilities, watching Chinese activities in the Yellow Sea. It's another piece in that regional security puzzle.
Okay, so we've laid out the hardware, the deployments, the diplomatic moves. Let's try to get inside the thinking. What are the core perspectives of the key decision makers here? What worldviews are clashing?
If we synthesize it down, you really see three main strategic drivers. First, from China and the PLA. They view these U.S. and U.K. naval activities fundamentally as provocations. Their actions, the surveillance, those constructive kills, are framed as defending sovereignty and ensuring their military readiness isn't interfered with.
Okay. Perspective two.
The United States and the U.K. Their narrative centers on upholding freedom of navigation, international law, and demonstrating a tangible commitment to regional allies. Those high-profile deployments, like the USS Ohio, are justified under that banner. Deterrence and reassurance.
And third.
The Philippines and Taiwan. Their position is arguably the most complex. They're trying to balance diplomatic engagement. You see President Marcos reaffirming the One China policy, for example, while simultaneously boosting their own defense readiness and actively seeking stronger multilateral alliances. It's a classic hedging strategy against uncertainty.
Given those competing perspectives, we then see two main courses of action emerging, almost in competition themselves. Option one seems focused squarely on deterrence.
Right. That involves pushing for that potential Asia-Pacific Mutual Defense Treaty we mentioned, backed by continued visible military presence from the U.S., Japan, Australia, and the Philippines.
But then you have option two, which prioritizes dialogue. This is reflected in the stated goal, shared by both Manila and Beijing actually, that the South China Sea disputes shouldn't derail the entire bilateral relationship.
They prefer negotiation, sticking to international law frameworks. This approach generally has backing from ASEAN and the UN. The fundamental challenge, of course, is that actions taken under option one, the deterrence track, often make the dialogue needed for option two much, much harder.
That's the core tension, isn't it? And while all this geopolitical chess unfolds, there's this other massive factor that no one controls, the Pacific typhoon season. We absolutely have to shift focus now to the sheer force of nature impacting the region.
Yes, the environmental factors are a huge constraint on everything else. This past week was really marked by multiple concurrent tropical systems. We saw Typhoon Hagupit, a super typhoon, make two landfalls back-to-back in southern China, Guangdong and Guangxi provinces.
Between September 24th and 25th.
Correct, causing severe winds, flooding, and forcing rail suspensions.
How does a super typhoon like that directly impact the military situation we were just discussing?
Immediately, it hits readiness. A storm like Hagupit forces the grounding of surveillance aircraft, like those Reaper drones. It necessitates naval fleets either scattering or rushing to secure ports, which obviously halts freedom of navigation operations. And critically, it increases the risk of maritime accidents, the last thing anyone needs amid high tensions.
And Hagupit wasn't alone. Another system, Typhoon Boloi, formed on September 24th. Where is that headed?
The forecast track takes it towards Hainan Island, China. But then things got even more complex.
How so?
Another disturbance, known as 93W, intensified rapidly into Typhoon Matam. This one is expected to track west-northwest, potentially moving through the Philippines.
And potentially affecting Taiwan.
Yes, potentially bringing intermittent rain to eastern Taiwan right during their important Mid-Autumn Festival and Double Ten holiday period in early October. So planning for that is crucial.
And adding to the weather stress, Taiwan itself has been dealing with extreme heat, separate from the typhoons.
That's right. Sustained high temperatures, up to 38 degrees Celsius, or about 100 Fahrenheit, in Taipei and Neihu, driven by a persistent Pacific high-pressure system.
So local authorities there are dealing with a dual threat, essentially.
Exactly. Constant public health warnings about heat and sun protection, while simultaneously coordinating preparedness efforts for the potential impact of Typhoon Matam. It really highlights the region's environmental volatility.
Finally, let's touch upon the public reaction. Our sources included analysis of social media sentiment, particularly on X, formerly Twitter. What's the general feeling out there about these events?
It's a valuable indicator of global perception. Aggregating the sentiment across relevant hashtags, hashtag China, hashtag Taiwan, hashtag South China Asia, hashtag Philippines, hashtag place, the overwhelming feeling is negative towards China's assertive actions.
Yeah.
We're seeing averages between 70% and 85% negative sentiment across most of these topics.
What's driving that negativity? What specific concerns are people expressing?
The language revolves around concerns over bullying tactics, aggression, and general threats to regional stability. On the flip side, you see strong global solidarity expressed through hashtags like hashtag Stand With Taiwan or those supporting the Philippines' maritime defense efforts. There are calls for international action.
Are there any significant positive views expressed?
They're minimal, really, averaging maybe 5% to 15%. And these tend to be limited to state-affiliated accounts or strong nationalist voices defending China's actions purely as asserting sovereign rights.
Is there any common ground visible in the sentiment?
Yes, one broad area of agreement, a widespread recognition of the high regional tension, definitely.
Yeah.
And interestingly, a shared immediate concern about disaster preparedness due to the very active typhoon season. Military planners and civilians alike are watching those weather maps very closely.
So wrapping this up, what does this all mean for you, our listener, in the immediate future? What should we be watching in the coming days and weeks?
Okay, on the military side, expect continued U.S. and allied freedom of navigation operations. And inevitably, continued Chinese military responses, surveillance, readiness drills, especially near those contested areas.
Diplomatically.
Keep an eye on the U.S.-Philippine relationship. The ongoing expansion of their military and diplomatic cooperation is a key indicator of alliance strengthening in real time.
And, of course, the weather.
Absolute critical.
Yeah.
The precise track and intensity of Typhoon Matam need close monitoring, as does the potential for any new tropical disturbances forming east of Taiwan during this holiday period.
And finally, any specific localized disputes to watch?
Yes, pay attention to Huangyan Island, Scarborough Shoal. Specifically, how the Chinese Coast Guard begins to enforce regulations around that newly designated marine nature reserve. Will using environmental claims as justification lead to more friction or confrontations? That's a key question. It really just reinforces the complexity we began with. The Indo-Pacific is grappling with simultaneous challenges, military ones that demand intense strategic thought, and environmental ones demanding constant vigilance. Regional leaders aren't just worried about the other side's next move, they're also tracking the path of the next potential super typhoon. It really is a region defined by these dual pressures.
And that detailed, impartial report you just heard was compiled by Stylo News. Stylo utilizes a vast network of traditional news sources alongside platforms like X to generate these timely AI-powered intelligence reports. For AI-powered news on demand, allowing you to track global events as they unfold, we certainly encourage you to subscribe to Stylo News. You can find it at www.stylonews.com. Thank you for joining us for this deep dive. We appreciate you tuning in and hope to have you with us again next time. And please do follow Stylo News on your favorite social media platforms.